an increase in the media coverage with more than 4 times compared to our previous Sustainable Development Impact summits. I think there is a lot of interest now on how we can also mobilize public and private partnerships to making the world a better place, and that's for sure needed. This panel is really about resetting global cooperation, and we know we are faced with a polarized world. The world was also polarized before the pandemic, but it is now more obvious that to deal with the most pressing issues, we also need to collaborate. Problem no, COVID-19 anywhere is COVID-19 everywhere. And many of the most pressing issues that we are faced with don't travel with passports, they don't know borders. And then to deal with it, we will need to find common solutions. The increasingly strained nature also of the G2 cooperation has a risk of decoupling economic and technological, internet turning into splinternet, and etc. In such a context, interaction and also the fact that the international institutions need to adapt new actors and new technologies create new kind of challenges. Old structures and old instruments alone will not be sufficient, but discarding existing framework would create a worrisome vacuum. How can we find solutions together in a polarized world? How to mitigate the vacuum? And how to possibly reset the world in a post-COVID reality? We have a great panel to cover this. We have the External Foreign Affairs Minister of India. We have the Minister for International Cooperation from Egypt, Foreign Minister also from Finland, and we have the former Foreign Minister of Argentina, Chief of Staff at the UN, Susana Malcorra. Welcome so much. We're really, really privileged to have you here, and hopefully we will also see some outcomes and directions on how we can find some low-hanging fruits when it comes to international cooperation moving forward. I would like to go to Minister of External Affairs of India first, Mr. Jan Shankar. We know that you also published a book recently where you looked at India's role in the world and also how to collaborate. Are there any low-hanging fruits now where we can possibly find common solutions, and what will India's role be in this as the second most populous country in the world?
Well, thank you, Borge. Good to see you and delighted to join the panel. And for the record, here's my book. My short answer to your question is all the answers are in the book, so take a look. Let me give you a longer answer. I think your first point was a very valid point, which was there were tensions in the world even earlier about the coronavirus. The COVID pandemic has definitely complicated the world much more. A lot of the trends have kind of got accentuated. And if we do an honest stock taking of this last 6-7 months, I don't think, frankly, it would be a good report card on most countries and most regions of the world. Now, there are much deeper issues. I think one of them is really what is globalization about? Traditionally, and including in the WEF, people have looked at it very much more economically as trade, investment, financial rules. Whereas what the pandemic has really brought out is the indivisibility of the world. And what you said, corona anywhere is corona everywhere, just like climate change anywhere, challenges to it is climate change challenges everywhere, like terrorism somewhere is a terrorism everywhere. I think we need to revise our sense of what is really globalization. The second point I would make is that definitely the world is more nationalistic. It was already heading that way. It has become more so. Our sense of what is national security has grown. It covers health security, economic security. Our desire to have more things in our control has also grown. So there's a sort of strategic autonomy of supply chains in a way. And what we are seeing, and this will be the big issue, is countries leveraging trade, leveraging connectivity, leveraging data. This, in a sense, will be the new politics that we are heading into. And, you know, there are no easy answers. My sense is others who have a more global view of the world need to step up and set an example. My view is this is really the debate we are going to be preoccupied after the corona.
And really recommend your book. I think we also will have to understand India much better moving forward. And we know that India is also playing a much more important role geopolitically. I know, Minister, that you recently traveled to Iran, Tehran, you were in Moscow, and I think you're also heading now to Tokyo. I think one question we're all wondering about, we have seen what I also alluded to, the G2, China and the US. There is challenges in that relationship, but lately this also has been quite challenging on the borders between India and China. Where do you see the relationship between these two extremely important countries moving in the decades ahead?
I think where India and China are concerned, it's important that they understand the need to accommodate each other's rights. I mean, clearly they will have some common interests and many interests which are more individual or nationally centered. And that process of how to adjust to each other when both of them are rising, I mean, to my mind, is one of the big issues in the diplomacy of both countries. Now, the border issue happens to be one part of that problem. And you are right. I mean, we are going through a very, in a sense, an unprecedented situation. But if one looks at it, you know, from a somewhat longer term, I would say this is one facet of a larger phenomenon for which both India and China have to sit down and find a solution.
No, I think you're so right, Minister, and spot on saying how do nations deal with each other in a situation where they're both growing in importance globally, because there will be areas of common interest, but there will be areas also when you look at things a bit differently, and you also have to cope with that. As a former Foreign Minister of Norway, I know this because we also have Russia as our neighbor, to put it that way. My third question to you, Minister, is related to the technology. We know that India is the country with the third largest amount of unicorns in the world. And there is a huge digital ecosystem in India. And I mentioned also this internet turning into the splinternet, the decoupling of the technologies. How do you look at technology in a diplomacy context, and how much is the competition around being on top of the fourth industrial revolution and AI and Internet of Things and big data part of also the rivalry we're seeing between the G2 today?
Well, Boge, the issue, you know, one of the outcomes, in a sense, accidental outcomes of this pandemic has been how digital we all became. And in our case, I can tell you, you know, whether it was the app by which we did contact tracing and we tracked people who could potentially be infected by coronavirus, or whether it was actually delivery of food and even money to people's accounts, the usage of the digital medium, both for delivery, for governance, this increased hugely. So one thing I can tell you, I mean, there's been an enormous sort of jump and acceleration in the digitization of the world, and particularly of a country like India. And I think the lesson learned from there is that there are a lot of things you can kind of use it to leapfrog in terms of development. Because we are more prolific digitally, we also obviously need to worry much more about the security of data. I think that's that's a flip side of that phenomenon. So when we look at the global debates, I think a lot of those debates are also relevant to India, not all of them, some of them. But where India itself is concerned, we have seen well before the COVID. I mean, one of Prime Minister Modi's very, very early campaigns was for a digital India. Along with that, a skill India, along with that, a startup India. So if you are seeing a proliferation of unicorns, there's a very good reason. I mean, there's a process and a thinking which has produced that. And my sense is that, again, I go back to my original point about what is globalization. I think we are looking really at a more knowledge-driven economy. We need to find ways of work. We need to find ways of, we need to think of the world as a much more integrated workplace than we have done typically. I think those are requirements which will shape this debate that you're talking of. And I don't think there's just a debate between, the G2 or the big, the major powers. I think this is a larger debate in which the world has an interest and should speak up.
Maybe we're faced with the G3 now, huh? So thank you so much, Minister. Let's move to Egypt, to Minister Rania Al-Mashat. Rania, you have labeled the years 2021 as the years for multilateralism, and you also underlined that multilateralism is very, very important for the Middle East and North Africa. When you look at the UN now 75th anniversary, and as I mentioned earlier on, how do we make sure that the international organizations are more adaptive and also are able to be part of finding solutions when there are new challenges that we are faced with?
Well, thank you very much, Borge, and congratulations on the success of the Impact Summit. I attended it, of course, last year in New York and now virtually. And I think what is very different this year, and this leads into multilateralism, is that everybody has been tested. Many of the discussions that we have and have been going on over the past years have really come to the fore in a way that has affected citizens, countries, corporates, and each of the themes that were being floated globally, everybody has felt them one way or the other. The pandemic has shown that no one is in isolation, as you identified earlier, and therefore everybody has to be part of a collective solution. No country had the silver bullet. All of us had a chance to learn from each other. There have been, despite many of the shortcomings and pitfalls in handling certain things in the pandemic, there have also been a few successes. And these successes have given us confidence that some of the issues that we were worried about engaging in are actually what helped us in this very important test. And when I talk about international cooperation and multilateralism, I want to emphasize what we do here within the ministry, and that it pushes both bilateral and multilateral cooperation. And that is what I label economic diplomacy. And economic diplomacy for where I sit comes with three principles. The first is having multi-stakeholder platforms where our partners come, civil society is there, private sector is there. And I'll give you an example in a minute. The second is when we talk about official development assistance for development, how do we do the mapping between that and the SDGs that all of us want to succeed in fulfilling by 2030? And then the third point has to do with creating a global partnerships narrative, a narrative that empowers us and also engages everyone around the importance of what we can do in a multilateral framework. And let me give an example of successful multilateral platforms. I was in Luxor over the last weekend, and there we, in celebration of the 75th anniversary for the UN, and I was in a village called Al Baghdadi Village. It's a program that we have, Ministry of International Cooperation, Ministry of Agriculture, and the World Food Program, where there's a circular economy for small farmers. They have been able to consolidate land, use water effectively, create solar panels, so move from diesel to solar energy. This has been implemented in 60 villages. And now, because of the importance of food security agriculture, we're going to be scaling up to 500. So these are very important examples of where a multilateral institution with civil society, which is on the ground, can actually create real effective outcomes. And then this was provided as also example for South-South cooperation going forward. So these are, I feel that the protection gap that exists, the investment gap that exists, the digital gap that exists, create opportunities for us, as Professor Schwab has labeled it, the Great Reset. It's a reset for many things. So now we have, I believe, over the past few months, and a very important learning by doing mechanism. We have seen it in action. We have seen the importance of pushing forward an agenda where all of us are sitting together and very quickly trying to come up with solutions. We've been pushed to innovate. We've been pushed to be agile. And I believe, and I was part of a session on the risk reset, that really having that integrated within the functions of a government or the functions of a corporate are definitely inevitable.
Shukran, Minister. Thank you for that. And as you referred to, Professor Klaus Schwab has also written a book, The Great Reset, that also will be the theme for our annual meeting that we have moved physically to spring next year. Before the pandemic, we also saw inequalities in the world, growing inequalities in the developed world, but also partly in the developing world. You referred, Minister, to the SDGs. If we don't get it right, we can maybe see hundreds of millions of people moving into extreme poverty this year. So we even further away from reaching the overall goal of the SDGs, eradicating all extreme poverty by 2030. So how do you address inequalities in your country, and what is your expectation now in a post-COVID world? Because I think we're all worried that we will see growing inequalities now, and especially in emerging economies where there's less fiscal space to launch stimulus packages like we see in the US and Europe.
Thank you, Borji. And I think that one of the themes that we have endorsed with the World Economic Forum and other countries through governments and private sector has been the stakeholder capitalism principles. And those are really efforts to try and make sure that we create more inclusive societies that through better integration of innovation, better capitalization of the technology so that we can push forward with more jobs for the youth. The Middle East has around 60% of its population at a young age. So that requires very important focus on equipping them with the tools that can provide forward. Also, governance structures are very important. And then the concept of having more regional integration so that everyone's comparative advantage can be put together and then we can scale up. So absolutely. And that's why I started by saying there's a protection gap, meaning that pushing through the fiscal space to continue with the protection or sort of widening the protection requires very strong cooperation going forward between all stakeholders, that's government, private sector and civil society. And these all are possible through very clear frameworks that, through governments creating the conducive environment and also encouraging private sector, which I believe has also played a very important role through this period and also has an important role going forward. So the issues and the challenges are there. However, I believe that the reforms that took place pre-COVID for us in Egypt have helped us through COVID, and the reform agenda continues. And this is something that has become very much within the focus and the vision of the government collectively with all actors within society, and definitely with our partners in the international community, whether they are the bilateral or multilateral institutions that we very closely work with.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure now to go to the Foreign Minister from Finland, Pekka Haavisto. I've always been an admirer of the diplomacy of Finland. We know balancing is a very important part of your diplomacy. We know that the US president, the Russian president, and also the Chinese president have chosen also Helsinki as a major place to visit. Would you, Minister, have any advice, and how is your outlook on this growing competition and polarization between the G2? Is there any kind of modus vivendi between the two of them?
Thanks, Borge, and first congratulations for the great webinar that you have been running and with good audience, good amount of the audience. And by the way, greetings from my home studio. When you visit Brussels, you get home quarantine, and this is my quarantine room which I'm doing my duties. And it was so interesting to listen Rani and my good friend, the Minister Jaishankar from India, of your thoughts. And let me just maybe begin when thinking about the topic of the discussion. I have been thinking so much of the Secretary General Guterres wording of four horsemen of apocalyptica, where he referred to military tensions globally rising, our planet is burning, the climate issue, global mistrust, our multilateral system is on the edge, and also the wild west of cyberspace that you also, Borge, referred to, and now actually we can add the fifth horseman, which is the COVID-19, which is causing a lot of troubles to all of us. And I think this is something that is also addressing the wider security issue. I think Minister Jaishankar raised this issue that it's not only about anymore in people's minds about the military security, it's about the food security, it's about the energy security, it's about the health security issues, and we should admit the benefits of the multilateral cooperation when we are searching for the vaccination, the important role of the WHO, and so forth. And this, of course, brings also me to your question that we need all parties in this international cooperation. We definitely need China if you speak about the health issues. We definitely need China if you speak about the climate challenges and greening of our economies. And I can see
wondering that, of course, traditionally UN also has played an important part in peace and reconciliation. But what we have seen unfolding when multilateralism is not as functioning so well, and we know that there is also a toxic situation in the Security Council, we see this proliferation of proxy conflicts. So we don't see the big nations maybe confronting each other directly. It does happen, like with the incidents now on the border between India and China, but mainly it happens like in Libya. It happens in Yemen. We've seen it in Syria. We've seen it in Iraq. Does this keep you up at night? Could some of these conflicts really come out of control? So we could be faced like with the Cuba crisis, or we could really see things escalating, not planned, but it increases so much the risk that on top of all the challenges we have, the contraction economy, the pandemics, climate change, we could even see bigger conflicts escalating, and without the UN having the leverage to really mitigate this?
Well, clearly, we do have a risk there, Borge. When I refer to competitive multilateralism, and by the way, I agree with Minister Jaishankar that includes reform multilateralism. I don't see those two concepts being at odds. That, in my view, is the best possible scenario we have before us. We have alternatives. We have the alternative of a full breakdown of military restraint between the big powers. That's an option, maybe not very high, but it's there. We, of course, have a deeper proxy war scenario where, in the end, some of the big powers are drawn into the scenario because it gets so bloody. So yes, there are these alternatives. And the fact that the Security Council is unable to deliver is a problem. And that's part of the reform I'm sure the minister referred to, you know. But how is it that we are going to reform the Security Council when in the end, the permanent five only agreed to one thing, which is not to reform it? That's the only thing they are in full agreement. And the rest, we all agree that it should be reformed, but each one of us almost, or different groups have different solutions for how to reform it. So it's a perfect storm not to reform it. So from my perspective, we need to tackle this notion of networks, coalitions. And there is one thing that I will dare say we might need to think about, and that is the notion of full consensus to adopt certain decisions. Maybe full consensus is a great tool when there is intention to agree. When you are in an environment where there is no intention to agree, consensus is a tool to block. So maybe that's one thing we can put on the table to start changing and reforming the old 75-year-old institution that in the end we all love.
No, muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Susanna. We are running out of time, but my script is now the following. I would like then to go to Pekka. You know, you also have a career before you became foreign minister. You dealt a lot with peace and reconciliation in your lives. I would like you to shortly comment then on what Susanna now said, also regarding the proxy conflicts, as I mentioned. And also, Rania, you have Libya next door, so you're living this every day from Egypt side. And then I go to the big country at the end, India. And Minister, I give you the opportunity to sum up. That makes my job also easier. So Pekka and then Rania.
Thanks, Borge, and thank you, Susanna, for an interesting analysis. And I pick up your alternative two, which is some kind of alliance for the democratic countries or liberal democracies defending democratic values. And of course, this might come. This might be one track. But then, at least I'm thinking that it is not enough when we look the wider multilateral context, maybe the rule of law countries. There are countries who might not identify themselves as liberal democracies, but are following the rule of law in the international arena. And I think that's we should have also wider coalitions, but that is possible that we have different circles in the future. And then let me just shortly comment on the conflicts. I was this summer visiting Baghdad and Erbil and trying to understand where, for example, Iraq now stands, and really a country that is influenced by so many neighbors or so many big powers in different ways. And really, I think your analysis is correct that we have these territories for proxy activities. Syria is one, Libya is one, Iraq is one, and so forth. And we have a big challenge. And I agree that until the Security Council is agreeing what to do, it's extremely difficult to settle these bigger conflicts, and unfortunately these proxy trends are ongoing. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Minister Rania.
Yes, you know, it's the few proxy war examples that you chose happen to be all in the Middle East, and it's Egypt's destiny. And it's Egypt's destiny that it's the biggest country in terms of population and has played pivotal roles over history. And when we look at the first priority for Egypt, we host more than 5 million migrants from Sudan, from Yemen, from Syria, and they live with us exactly like citizens. And that has been one of the key contributions that Egypt has been very keen on providing that environment. Also, trying to broker sometimes in the Libya case, there has been a very important, I wouldn't call them interventions, but diplomatic activities and efforts that have been streamlined with Europe as well to ensure that the Libyan people also have the right to choose and move in a direction which is conducive going forward. Maybe two things I want to conclude with. On the idea of competition, we are hosting the World Cup for handball. And on that occasion, I wrote a tweet where I was saying that multilateralism in its essence is just like sports. There's competition, but there's also complementarity. So this is really a theme that has shown and come to the forefront during the pandemic. And we need to capitalize on that because certain things have given us, and when I call us, I'm talking about a generation that looks forward and looks at creating consensus rather than conflict. So there is a very big opportunity going forward that I see and I feel. The second is you need to mobilize people around that opportunity. And that's why in our global partnerships narrative that we do with all our multilateral and bilateral friends and institutions around the world, we say people at the core, projects in action and purpose as the driver. And these really go in line with the ESG principles, which are planet, prosperity, people, and governance. So I think that we just need to keep on pushing the agenda. We need to have leaders who believe in it, showcase it, and there's, I believe, many important good examples to show so that successes can be scaled.
Well, thank you so much for joining us the second time during this summit. It's really highly appreciated. And I know go to you, Minister, to sum up, External Affairs Minister of India.
Well, thank you. It's not an easy conversation to sum up, but let me respond very quickly to three very important points which my three colleagues made, starting with Egypt. Look, there are, Borge, you referred to what keeps us awake at night. You don't need World War III to keep you awake at night. For people in Libya, what's happening in Libya keeps them awake. For people in Yemen, what's happening in Yemen keeps them awake. We shouldn't be ignoring, it may not be a global event, but because it's there, we shouldn't be ignoring it. And Afghanistan is the textbook lesson of what happens when you ignore, what may be regional or even national. The second point, which my colleague Pekka made from Finland, look, again, we are a democracy. We are very proud. We are the largest democracy, very proud to be a democracy. But I accept that there are many countries in the world which are not democratic. But I think there is one fundamental which we should all observe, which is rule of law. That if we sign up to agreements and conventions and regimes, we should follow that. Because if you don't, there won't be a world order. And that has nothing to do with democracy. The third issue, point I would flag is, what Ms. Malcorra said, which was consensus when it comes to reforming multilateralism should not be used to block. And that is really what we have seen. So in the name of consensus, you're actually denying the vast majority of countries the right to express their choice. From my side, two very quick points. One, that I think on globalization, which is really what we are discussing, it's important neither to be theological nor to be transactional. Globalization requires a updated debate, I would say, after the COVID era. And I hope WEF will take the lead in that. And my last point, I think if we all have to make a difference, like individuals, I think countries should set examples. All of us need to do what we can despite our limitations and constraints. And as an example, I would say at least India, we've stepped forward in areas like pharmaceuticals in response to the demands which came up. At the end of the day, the world will only be a better place if people are willing to step forward and do the best that they can.
Thank you so much. And thank you to this great panel. I learned a lot, and I also can strongly underline that the World Economic Forum, as the international organization for public-private cooperation, will be a real partner when we have to build again a better world, but also a more inclusive, sustainable world where we also create jobs for the young population. And without the private sector on board, I think we can not reach the SDGs. So, and I so strongly also agree on the rule of law, but also respecting agreements that are done. That is the basis of trust. And trust is the basis also for all international cooperation. So you cannot hear the 20,000, 30,000 people watching it, but I'll give the panel virtual applause from my side. You're great, very great privilege to have you here. So no, that was the close of the closing plenary, but we will continue because we also have two of our co-chairs, and we will also then sum up all these 4 days where as I underlined, we have had 22 million watchers during the week. We have had almost 1,000 CEOs and C-suite executives being part either of panels or discussions. We have had young people, global shapers, young global leaders, and not least social entrepreneurs that are so crucial. The Schwab social entrepreneurs have also played a major role during this summit. We also would like to get feedback from all our viewers and participants. So we would like each of you to just contribute with one word. What was your main kind of outcome of this summit? And we can see powerful insights or work or social entrepreneurship. So we put it out here, and you can now contribute, all of you that are watching this, and we'll come back with your reactions a little bit later. So while you share your response, let me then turn to our two very, very special guests. Let me start with Sheneva Okoro-Onu, Global Shaper, Accra Hub, Ghana. I have seen you've been watching also the panel, and you're also one of the judges of the final Uplink competition to announce the winners of the Trillion Trees Challenge. That also came out of Davos this year. We have to plant the trillion trees to contribute to mitigate climate change. So thank you for joining us. So good to see you again. So I give you the floor.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm truly honored to be here. My name is Sheneva Okoro-Onu. I'm a social entrepreneur, an environmentalist and the founder and managing director of the Waste Equate Hub. But before I go on, I'd like to say a huge shout out to the Global Shippers Accra Hub who are watching us right now. I'm really, really excited to be here and being entrusted with a task to judge the final pitch for the Uplink Trillion Tree Challenge is an experience that I will never forget. And to all the judges that was part of the process, we did an incredible job, I must say, looking at the final 3 on the list. So thank you all so much for your commitment. I must say that I was amazed by the number of eco-entrepreneurs and the quality and ingenuity of their innovations. With more than 250 of you, I feel so inspiring and reassuring that we have what it takes to tackle and solve climate crisis and environmental sustainability. And I'm even more thrilled that the World Economic Forum and Uplink, through 1 trillion trees, are committed to accelerating the impact in addressing sustainability and environmental challenges. Indeed, there is hope for the future. Looking at my journey as an eco-entrepreneur myself, I could clearly fit in the shoes of all the eco-entrepreneurs, understanding the processes and challenges that might have faced scaling up their solutions. I am thrilled that they have this support, and I'm really grateful to the communities for enabling them. We must continue to encourage and support them, and I must commend Uplink founding partners, Salesforce, Deloitte, and LinkedIn for enabling the call for innovative solutions that will help them meet the trillion tree goal. I know you all can't wait to find out who the winners are. So without further ado, the 3 winners for the Uplink Trillion Tree Challenge are, drumroll, Inga Foundation, Referendum and Ecosphere, and Benio Nature Foundation. Congratulations to you guys. And also, you all voted for the People's Choice Award. So that award also goes to Benio Nature Foundation. Double congratulations to you guys. And for all the eco-entrepreneurs, you're all winners. And be rest assured that your impact is valid now more than ever. So you need you to work with us in order to achieve the set goal. A powerful voice for the planet I have come to know and work with as a judge during this 3-day session, Hanidu Umar Ibrahim said yesterday in her speech, there is no vaccine for climate change, but we can fight together if we all engage. So I'll encourage us all to reach out and offer our support to scale these solutions together. And to learn more about the forest champions and innovators, please visit Uplink or the World Economic Forum. Thank you.
The biggest kudos to the winners of the Trillion Trees. My warmest congratulations and applause. And as you said, there might not be a vaccine against climate change, but we know there is a remedy. And the remedy is very easy. It's a low-hanging fruit, a low-carbon society. And we know it's doable. And we know the cost of climate change far exceeds the cost of action. So this has been also a Sustainable Development Impact Summit that is really, really about action. And I'm very pleased to go then to Tiffany Yu, the CEO and founder of Diversability. You're also co-chair of this summit. And I'm so thankful for you being the co-chair, but also being willing now at the end to share with us stories that have made impact on you, but also where you have seen real action coming out of this summit. Please, Tiffany.
Thanks, Borge, and it has been an incredible honor to be a co-chair of this summit. I came into this summit as a disability advocate, a social entrepreneur, and a proud global shaper. And I thought I would share 3 of my learnings or takeaways from this summit and 1 area of hope or 1 area of a call to action. So my words to describe this summit, and I really believe that the key to sustainable development is access. I didn't see that word on the Slido, but that's my word. And I find that kind of on all of my takeaways. So my first takeaway, which I did see on the Slido, was at the intersections. So when we think about the SDGs, when we think about the solutions we're building, how can we incorporate intersectionality into that? We're not just tackling one SDG, it actually impacts multiple SDGs. We can't just compartmentalize that. But at the same time, how can we incorporate disability inclusion? How can we incorporate LGBT inclusion, racial equity into the solutions that we're building as well? I really believe that the path to disability justice, disability equity, disability liberation is by really incorporating these perspectives into the solutions that we're building. My second is that the power of these forums, the power of this summit is the ability to convene. And before the summit started, I actually had an opportunity to connect with one of my fellow co-chairs, Rebecca Masisek, who is the CEO of TechSoup and someone who I've been following for a couple of years now. Her work is really incredible. And I think the opportunity, this session is called the closing moment, but I really see this not as a moment, but as the beginning of a movement. And I'm hoping that the conversations that we have here are the beginning of a relationship of us truly working together, both the public and the private sector and civil society all together. And finally, when I joined, it's very early here in San Francisco, but one of my other learnings is that COVID-19, as has been mentioned multiple times during this session, is impacting all of us. And especially in my own work and how I've moved about the world, I will acknowledge that I have been very US centric. And so how can we think about building solutions that are borderless? COVID-19 has been borderless. This summit has been borderless. I think when I think about this word access, I think about the fact that Borge mentioned 22 million views. I think about the number of people who have been able to access this summit when before in previous years, it may have been a much smaller group who have convened in New York. And in addition to being borderless, it's how can we be more unbiased as well? So with my Western perspective and how we think about access to aid, how can we make sure that that is democratized as well? Which leads me to, I guess, my area of hope or my call to action. And I was part of a session yesterday called Resetting Inclusion. And as I think about looking toward the future, I think about these words, trust, accountability, cooperation, all of those do need a little bit of a reset as well. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about the session that I was part of yesterday was I came into it with a disability perspective. One of my fellow co-chairs came into it with a perspective about including Indigenous populations. And then there was one other speaker who was focused on the future of work and labor unions and making sure that our workforce is included. And so we talk so much about making sure that we include people who are the most vulnerable or people who are at the margins. But the reality is that we're not really at the margins. And one of my learnings from that session was that there are so many communities who feel like they are being left behind as we move through this global reset. So my hope is that a reset truly is a reset, and we're building from the ground up by including all of these populations. My call to action yesterday was that anyone who is watching this who has the ability to hire disabled people and provide them dignified wage. While I know that including some of these more vulnerable communities might not happen overnight, my invitation is for the rooms that we don't have access to, for the people who are having these conversations to be our champions and allies. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. And I support so much your call to action to include also disabled people, and not at least thinking about all the young people being disabled in developing countries. And with the new economic challenges, no, let not these young disabled youth